If chicken feed disappeared from store shelves tomorrow, how long could your flock survive? For most backyard keepers, the honest answer is a few days. Maybe a week if you're stretching it. That's not a comfortable thing to sit with, especially after watching feed prices climb again this year. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to show you a simple system I built in a single weekend for less than $50. It won't replace commercial feed, and I want to be honest about that from the start, but it has quietly reduced how much feed I buy month after month, while making my flock a little less dependent on an increasingly unpredictable supply chain. This is the story of that system, why I built it, what's in it, what it actually produces, and what I'd tell you before you spend a single dollar on your own version. I've been running versions of this setup long enough to learn what actually works, and just as importantly, what doesn't. So today I'll show you the practical version, not the internet fantasy. To understand why this project matters, it helps to understand what's actually driving the cost of that feed bag in the first place. Most commercial layer feed is built around corn and soybean meal, priced on national and global commodity markets rather than set by your local feed store. A drought in the Midwest or a wet spring in Iowa shows up in your feed bag's price months later, even if you've never set foot near a cornfield. Add in transportation. Grain moving from field to mill to distributor to store, every leg burning diesel, and rising fuel costs get quietly folded into that price tag too. Feed prices haven't just risen, they've become unpredictable. A bag that was $14 in January might be $17 by fall, with little warning. None of this is going away soon. Weather, fuel, and global grain demand are structural realities, not temporary blips. And that's exactly why producing even a portion of your own feed makes financial sense. That's the entire premise behind what I built. Not feed independence, feed resilience. Here's exactly what went into this, and why. Every item was chosen because it was inexpensive, easy to find, and simple to replace. The core of the system is a set of food-grade 5-gallon buckets. I used 3 of them, and if you can find them used from a bakery, a restaurant, or a big box store deli counter, they're often free or close to it. Buying new food-grade buckets runs about $5 to $8 each, so budget around $20 if you're starting from zero. These buckets serve 2 purposes in this build: sprouting grain and holding duckweed or azolla, which I'll explain in a moment. If you're buying new buckets, I'll link the same style of food-grade buckets I use in the description. Next are seed trays, the kind used for starting garden seedlings. I picked up a stack of 10 for about $12. These are shallow, they drain well, and they stack, which matters because space is always tighter than you think once you start growing anything at scale in a backyard. If you want to skip buying trays entirely, disposable aluminum roasting pans with a few drainage holes punched in the bottom work almost as well, and you may already have some in a kitchen drawer. I'll also link sturdy seed trays similar to mine if you don't already have some. PVC pipe is optional, and I want to be upfront about that. I used about 6 feet of it, roughly $5 worth, to build a simple drip line for one of my trays. If you're comfortable hand watering every day, you can skip this entirely and save the money. I included it because I'm not always home to water on schedule, and a slow drip system means a tray doesn't dry out or mold while I'm gone. If you'd rather skip building one from scratch, there are inexpensive gravity-fed irrigation kits available now that work surprisingly well. I'll leave a few options in the description. For plastic tubs, I use 2 storage totes, about $6 each, to grow duckweed and hold sweet potato vine cuttings. These don't need to be fancy. What matters is that they hold water without leaking and get enough sun. Watering itself doesn't need to be complicated. A watering can you already own works fine for the trays. And for the tubs, rainwater collected in a repurposed jug does the job at no cost at all. If you want a slightly more hands-off setup, a simple gravity-fed drip line built from that PVC pipe and a few dollars of tubing is enough. I'll also include the watering can and sprayer I use, since they've held up well over time. Finally, basic hand tools, a utility knife, a small hand trowel, maybe a pair of scissors for harvesting greens. Most people already own these. If you don't, budget $5 to $10 for secondhand versions from a hardware store bargain bin. Add it up, and you land somewhere between $40 and $48, depending on how much you already have on hand and how much you're able to source secondhand. That's the whole system. No solar panels, no automated controllers, nothing that needs a manual to operate. The buckets and trays are just containers. What you put in them is where the real value comes from, and this is worth slowing down on, because not everything you can grow is equally useful to a chicken. Wheat, barley, and oats are the backbone of this system, and for good reason. Soaked and sprouted over a few days, these grains turn into what's called fodder, a dense mat of roots and young green shoots that chickens will eat readily. Sprouting doesn't dramatically increase the protein content of the grain, but it does increase its water content and digestibility, and it introduces some fresh enzymatic activity that a dry grain doesn't have. Chickens seem to genuinely prefer it to dry grain, and it stretches a pound of dry seed into several pounds of fresh, appealing feed. If you'd like detailed step-by-step instructions for fodder, duckweed, azolla, or moringa, which are also parts of the systems in this video, I've put those tutorials together in a playlist linked in the description. Those tutorials go into far more detail than I can cover here, so they're a great next step once you've seen the overall system. Black oil sunflower seed deserves a special mention. It's higher in fat and protein than the cereal grains, and chickens love it. I don't sprout this one. I feed a modest amount whole, a few times a week, as a supplement rather than a staple. It's calorie-dense, which is useful in cold months, but it isn't a replacement for a balanced ration on its own. Duckweed is one of the more surprising performers in this system. It's a tiny floating aquatic plant that multiplies quickly in a tub of still water with decent sunlight, and it's remarkably high in protein for a plant, often cited in the range of 20 to 35% of dry matter, depending on growing conditions. The catch is that it's mostly water by fresh weight, so you need a meaningful volume of it to make a real dent in your bird's diet. Think of it as a strong protein supplement, not a primary feed source. If you're having trouble finding a starter culture locally, I'll include a few sources that many backyard keepers use. You'll also find the full tutorial on starting duckweed in the resource playlist in the description. Azolla is a small aquatic fern that fixes its own nitrogen and can grow explosively in warm, humid conditions. Where climate allows, generally in warmer regions with long growing seasons, it's an excellent high-protein supplement. In colder climates, azolla struggles or dies back entirely in winter, so I want to be honest that this isn't a year-round solution everywhere. If you're in a northern climate, treat it as a warm season bonus, not a cornerstone. Comfrey is a deep-rooted perennial that's easy to grow once established, and its leaves are relatively high in protein for a garden plant. It should be fed in moderation and is one part of a varied diet rather than a primary feed, since comfrey contains compounds that are best not fed in large, continuous quantities. A handful of chopped leaves a few times a week is a reasonable way to use it. Moringa is worth growing if you're in a warm enough climate to sustain it, since it doesn't tolerate frost. Its leaves are notably high in protein and micronutrients, and chickens take to it readily. For those of us in cooler regions, this one may only work as a container plant brought indoors for winter, which limits its practicality somewhat. If you decide to grow moringa, you'll find the full step-by-step guide in the resource playlist below. Sweet potato vines are an underused resource. The vines and leaves, not just the tubers, are edible for chickens and reasonably nutritious, and the plant is forgiving to grow in a tub or bed with minimal care. Pumpkin is valuable in two ways. The flesh and seeds make a good seasonal treat, and pumpkin seeds have a long-standing reputation among poultry keepers as a mild natural dewormer, though I'd stop short of calling this a proven substitute for a proper worming protocol. Think of it as a helpful habit, not a guarantee. And then there are kitchen vegetable scraps, which cost nothing, and which most of us are already generating every day. Vegetable trimmings, stale bread in small amounts, and garden surplus all have a place here. They're not nutritionally complete on their own, but as part of a varied supplement, They reduce waste and add variety your birds clearly enjoy. Here's how it actually comes together, step by step, in a way that doesn't require any special skill. Start with placement. You want your trays and tubs somewhere that gets several hours of morning sun but isn't blasted by full afternoon heat in summer, since that can dry sprouts out too fast or overheat duckweed tubs. A spot near an eave, a porch, or a shaded corner of a run works well. Somewhere close to a hose or rain barrel matters too, because you'll be watering often, and hauling water any real distance gets old fast. For the fodder trays, drill or punch a few small drainage holes in the bottom of each tray, if they don't already have them. Add a thin, even layer of wheat, barley, or oat seed. You want the seeds close together but not piled on top of each other. Rinse them well, soak the first day, then rinse and drain twice daily after that. Stack finished trays where they get light, and within about 5 to 7 days, you'll have a solid mat of green fodder ready to pull out and feed directly to the flock. Rinse the tray, and start the next batch immediately, so you always have 1 or 2 trays in progress. For the duckweed and azolla tubs, fill your plastic tote about 2/3 with water. Rainwater is ideal, since it has no chlorine to worry about. And introduce a starter culture, which you can often get from another keeper, a pond owner, or occasionally from a specialty supplier. Keep the water topped off, since evaporation happens fast in summer, and harvest gently with a fine kitchen strainer every few days, taking care to leave enough behind to keep multiplying. Comfrey, sweet potato vines, and moringa, where climate allows, are best planted in the ground near your coop, if you have the space, or in a large tub with drainage holes if you don't. These need far less daily attention than the trays or tubs, mostly just regular watering and occasional harvesting of the outer leaves, leaving the growing point intact so the plant keeps producing. Drainage matters more than people expect. Standing water in a fodder tray turns sour and moldy within a day or two. Every tray needs somewhere for excess water to go, whether that's drainage holes over a catch pan or simply tilting the tray slightly when you rinse it. As for schedule, most keepers find a rhythm of watering trays morning and evening, checking tubs every couple of days, and harvesting whatever's ready before the morning feeding. It becomes routine within a week or two, folded into the same walk you already take to open the coop and check on the flock. This is the part where I want to slow down and be completely honest with you, because there's a lot of exaggerated claims floating around on this topic. This system supplements a commercial ration. It does not replace one, especially for laying hens, who have specific and fairly demanding nutritional needs. Generally somewhere around 16 to 18% protein, along with calcium and a balanced mineral profile that a homegrown system simply cannot replicate consistently. Sprouted grains and garden greens are wonderful for variety, freshness, and some nutrient density, but they're not a complete diet on their own. In practical terms, keepers running a system like this typically report being able to offset somewhere in the range of 10 to 25% of their purchased feed, depending heavily on flock size, climate, season, and how much space and attention they're able to give the growing side of things. A keeper with 6 hens and a dedicated setup might offset more. A keeper with 30 birds and the same modest system will see a smaller percentage, simply because the math doesn't scale linearly without expanding the growing area to match. One retired couple I spoke with in central Ohio, keeping about a dozen hens, estimated that each 50-pound bag of feed lasted 4 to 5 days longer after running a system very similar to this for a couple of months. That's not a dramatic transformation. It's also not nothing, especially when that saving repeats every single month, season after season, for an investment that was under $50 to begin with. The real value isn't just the dollars saved either. It's the resilience of having a working system already in place, already understood, already producing something, so that if feed becomes scarce or prices spike suddenly, you're not starting from zero. Even a simple system like this has a learning curve, and these are the mistakes that cost me the most time. The good news is that most problems are completely avoidable once you know what causes them. A few things trip up almost everyone who tries this, myself included when I first started. The most common mistake is growing too much at once. It's tempting to fill every tray you own on day one, but fodder and duckweed both need daily attention, and overextending yourself early leads to neglected trays, wasted seed, and a system you abandon within a month. Start with 1 or 2 trays and 1 tub, and expand only once the routine feels easy. Moldy sprouts are the second big issue, and they almost always come down to poor airflow, water sitting too long, or seed piled too thick in the tray. If you ever see gray growth, discard that batch entirely rather than feeding it, and thin your seed layer next time. Poor drainage causes the same problem from a different angle. If water pools in the bottom of a tray or tub for more than a day, you're inviting mold and rot. Check your drainage before you plant, not after. Feeding too many treats is a subtler mistake. Sunflower seed, pumpkin flesh, and kitchen scraps are wonderful in moderation, but keepers sometimes get so enthusiastic about homegrown feed that treats start crowding out the balanced commercial ration hens still need, especially layers. As a rule of thumb, homegrown supplements should stay a meaningful side dish, not the main course, particularly for actively laying birds. Nutritional imbalance follows from that same enthusiasm. A diet heavy in sprouted grain and light on protein and calcium can lead to thinner eggshells or a drop in lay over time. This system is meant to reduce your feed bill, not replace calcium supplementation like oyster shell or a properly formulated layer feed. And finally, don't ignore seasonal changes. Azolla and moringa slow down or die back in cold weather in most parts of the country. Fodder trays take longer to sprout in a cold garage than in a warm kitchen corner. Build in the expectation that this system will produce more in spring and summer and less in winter, and plan your feed budget accordingly rather than being caught off guard. I've collected every tool and supply I mentioned today into one resource list in the description, so you don't have to search for everything individually. I want to leave you with a shift in thinking, more than a project plan. The goal here was never to walk away from the feed store entirely. Anyone promising you that with a $50 bucket system isn't being straight with you. The goal is smaller and more achievable, to become a little less dependent on an unpredictable supply chain, 1 tray of fodder and 1 tub of duckweed at a time. That's the kind of progress that actually holds up. Not a dramatic overnight transformation, but a steady, repeatable habit that quietly softens the blow every time feed prices climb again, and that leaves you a little more prepared than you were the season before. For anyone who wants to build this exact setup, I've put together a complete list of the tools, supplies, seeds, and reference books I mentioned in today's video. You'll find everything organized in the description below. Because self-reliance was never about doing everything yourself. It's about needing less from a system you can't control, one small, deliberate step at a time. If you're ready to build your first system, the next video shows exactly how to grow chicken fodder from start to finish. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.